Hello, and welcome to another Bridge Project video, where today we're going to be going through another story called The Chinese Farmer. So just before we get into it, this is a story which is, it's an interesting one. It's very much about this idea that no matter what scenario you find yourself in, it's kind of perspective which matters most. And this is something that we know even scientifically and philosophically, is that if two people go through the same exact scenario, they will not have exactly the same response, let's say emotionally, or even physically, or all of these different things. They're not just bound to the particular scenario that you go through. And what matters most is perspective, which is very weird. It's kind of like placebo, but not really. So, for instance, if you go through something, really, a bad manner, let's say, if someone is shocking you, you can imagine this. If someone actually electrically shocks you, if you're viewing that shock like, oh wow, this really hurts, I don't want to be here, I don't like this, you will actually feel more negative emotion, let's say, than someone who's going in there and thinking, oh, I actually want to be shocked. I want to have this electric shock because it's going to make me a stronger person. They actually have different experiences, even though the exact same amount of electricity is going through their body. And this story is somewhat like that. It's got some other aspects to it as well, but I think that's probably one of the key parts of the video. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the idea of perspective, both throughout the story and at the end. So, the Chinese farmer, also called in Taoism or China, Sai Weng lost his horse. It's got to roll off the tongue. So, there once was an old farmer who lived with his son near the border of China. One day, his horse, his only horse, ran away into the wilderness. All of his neighbors heard the news, and they came over to comfort him. "What terrible luck," they said. And the farmer simply replied, "Maybe." Now, immediately, of course, this is me interjecting as the narrator. Obviously, we will continue, but immediately we can see something, two interesting things here. First of all, the fact that this is generally what some may consider let's say something that's bad, right? Everyone comes around and they've got the perspective that, oh, this is a bad thing, and they're being nice. They're not wrong in being nice to the farmer and saying, this is unfortunate. We'll try and comfort him. But then the farmer, of course, replies maybe, and I'm sure you can see where it's going to go, because his perspective is, who knows? Who knows what could come of this? And so, a few days later, the horse returned, but it did not return alone. It brought with it several beautiful wild horses, and the neighbors came back smiling. They all came round once again, and they turned to the farmer and his son and said, "What wonderful luck! How amazing this is!" But again, the farmer answered, "Maybe." The farmer's son began taming one of the wild horses. He was feeding it, taking care of it, but while riding it once, he was thrown to the ground and he broke his leg. The neighbors all came round once more and said, "How unfortunate." And the old farmer replied, as you might expect, "Maybe." Not long afterwards that his son broke his leg, the emperor's army came through the whole village, forcing every young man into military service to fight in a brutal war. But because the farmer's son had broken his leg, he was left behind. Many, if not all, of the young men who left to fight never returned. And the neighbors came to the old farmer again and said, "How fortunate your son was spared with his broken leg." And once again the old farmer simply smiled and replied, "Maybe." And so it's a really, really good story, and I think it kind of takes on two forms of either Taoism a mix of Taoism and Stoicism, I would say, where it's really not attaching any sense of one's emotional response or any sense of one's valuing, let's say, to outside occurrences of something that maybe you can't control. Now, I know even throughout this, you could have said that the old farmer could have kept his horse, locked up more tightly, or he could have made it so his son didn't go on the horse riding it and break his leg. All these different things. But I think the point of it is that, first of all, you could not live like that. You cannot live in the world trying to control everything, because then you get to a world where you've got far too much order. And if you're too ordered, then you leave no room for chaos, and you end up being more of a tyrant, let's say, right? It's not correct, because you physically cannot take the world and control all of reality. There's too many variables, and so it wouldn't be possible for that to happen. But I think this is really on the other side of things, where it's purely just an acceptance of the fact that you can't really control anything, and so you should not attribute the word good or bad to any particular scenario. And this is a key thing, not because it says that there is no such thing as good and bad. That's not what the story is saying. It's saying that you cannot tell whether an event that happens will eventually lead to something that's good or something that's bad. And so it's a very, very subtle difference, right? Many people might read this story and think, oh, it's pretty nihilistic, right? His horse is left and he's just like, I don't care. But it's not that. He never said he didn't care. He just has in the back of his mind that, well, who knows if this is going to end up being a good thing or a bad thing or a good thing, right? There's no value that you can put on it, because as soon as you say maybe in the moment, oh, this isn't a good thing, like his neighbors came over and they were very much just of the moment thinking and saying what terrible luck this is, and yet the farmer has in the back of his mind, well, this is part of the big plan, right? And good things may come from this. And this is actually bringing us back to what we talked about with perspective earlier. If you actually view this or any scenario as you can take knowledge from this, you can take wisdom from this, you can take learning from this, and you can improve from this, then any scenario which people might think is negative, like for instance the horse running away, if you view it as, well, I'm going to actually learn from this, I can become a better person from realizing the horse has run away, and then maybe help that not happen in future. But then also have the view that, well, the horse has run away, who knows, maybe it'll come back with several beautiful wild horses, and then that would be a wonderful thing to happen. So you can even see and tell with me recanting this story and talking through the ideas in it, I'm not maybe fully exactly aligned with what it might be on the face of it, let's say. I think it is correct what it's saying, but of course I'm not advocating, and some people might read the story as it is advocating for you to just let go of all control. Now, in all fairness, that's the typical Taoist approach, is like, you cannot control anything. What will happen will happen, what will be. And I think that is a really useful tool to have in your toolkit whenever you might need it, right? For instance, whenever I go through any scenario which some people might perceive as negative, I just think, well, first of all, what are the positives of the situation? And also, you can take this toolkit of well, like the old farmer says, like, maybe it's a bad thing, maybe it's a good thing, and you can use it as a tool in that scenario, and then have still a realization that I have control over my agency in my life, right? And I think this is the kind of the line that the story's walking, is that some people might take the reading of the story and think that the farmer does not control anything in his life. He is just purely letting everything be as it is. But I don't think that's correct, right? Nowhere in the story does it say that that's the case. In fact, if it says that, he's a farmer, that means that he's actively, waking up in the morning and he's going and he's farming, right? He's actually doing something that he has control over. And then when something happens, when an event happens which is outside of his particular ordered domain, let's say, when that chaos kind of erupts in the scenario, what the story is saying is the best way to approach that chaos is to just view it from a purely indifferent stance, let's say, and have the understanding that you are only feeling negative emotion if you decide to feel negative emotion. You could feel positive emotion about it. You could force yourself into gratitude, right? There's ways of viewing it. But the farmer here is purely just having it in his mind that maybe it's terrible luck, or maybe it's wonderful luck. Who knows what it's going to be at the end of the day? Those are things that you can't control. And so the things that you can't control, you have to be able to let go. Focus on the things you can control, of course, but if you're worried or happy as well, that's the key point of the story. If you're worried or happy about something that you can't control, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because, well, first of all, if you're worried about something you can't control, you are literally being worried for no reason. Because the only things in this world that you can control is by definition the things that you can control. And so why would you be worried about something you can't control? I know it's easier said than done, but it's true. And then here's the more interesting fact, as we see in the story, when the horses came back with several beautiful wild horses, and the neighbors were like, "Oh, what amazing luck!" The farmer still said, "Maybe," right? And this is the idea that because that's something that he could not control, he could have got swept away in the moment and thought, "Oh wow, this is amazing," right? I'm gonna take this positive emotion and I'm gonna ride that wave. But what he realizes, and this is such a great piece of wisdom, is that if you cannot control the thing that is giving you positive emotion, then you should not attribute positive emotion to it, because it can be swept away from you at a moment's notice, and then immediately you're going to feel the pain of that. And so only put effort into things, and only even put your perception onto things that you can control that will give you positive emotion. I'm not saying not to take positive emotion as it comes to you, but if there's something that's completely out of your control, then just keep in the back of your mind that it could go wrong, and if it goes wrong, you will feel some negative emotion because of that. And that's okay sometimes, right? For instance, you might think of sports games, right? You physically can't control really what your team is going to do. You do have agency in deciding which team you support, though, because you can look at the players and you can understand how good they might be, for instance. So it's not exactly fully detached, but we all support a team if we watch sports or other things, and if they fail, if they lose, then we feel negative emotion. And the reason we do that is because we've attached some kind of value to something that we cannot control, and when we win it feels good, right? But when we lose, of course, it's going to be the counterbalance of that. And again, I'm not saying not to do that, because I think that's like it's one of these pieces of pain which is worth it, because if everyone's watching the game, you're having a good time. Some people are going to lose, and it's a part of that balance. But even in that scenario, you have some agency and control in who's going to win. Basically, not really, but you can support the team that you believe will win. Let's say. Because you're supporting them for a reason. Whereas in these scenarios, if a horse is left, you have absolutely no control as to whether that horse is going to come back or not, right? And if your son breaks his leg, you have absolutely no control as to whether something good or bad is going to happen from that. So these particular examples in this particular story, each and every one of them is something that has completely. Once the event has happened, you have no control in the outcome of whether it's going to be good or bad, and so you should not attach any value to it. And that is what I think is hopefully the main point of the story. But of course, I might be wrong, as always. So, well, if any of you have any other thoughts on the story, please let me know. And that is it for today's video.